A single dad was dining alone, then a little girl whispered, "My mom has been looking for you for years." Marcus Webb was not the kind of man who treated himself to dinner. He was the kind of man who ate leftovers standing over the kitchen sink, who called a bowl of cereal dinner on long days, and who only ever set the table properly when his daughter Lily was home. But Lily was at her grandmother's that Thursday evening, and the house in Columbus, Ohio felt the way it always felt without her, too quiet, too still, like a room where someone had turned off the music but forgot to say why. So Marcus got in his car. He did not have a plan. He just drove. He passed a pizza place, a diner, and a sandwich shop before something caught his eye, a small Italian restaurant he had never noticed before, tucked between a laundromat and a flower shop on Elm Street. The lights inside were warm and golden. Through the window, he could see white tablecloths and a few candles on each table. It looked like the kind of place where people sat and talked for hours. It looked like the opposite of his quiet house. He parked and went inside. The hostess was a young woman with kind eyes. She smiled and asked if he was meeting someone. He said no, just himself tonight, and something about saying it out loud made his chest feel a little heavy. She did not make it awkward. She led him to a corner booth near the window and set a single menu in front of him without a word. He ordered the pasta special and a glass of red wine. He put his phone face down on the table, which was something he almost never did, and he looked out the window at the street. People walked by in their coats. A young couple shared an umbrella even though it was not raining. An old man walked a small dog that stopped to sniff at every lamppost. Marcus watched all of it and felt the strange, bittersweet feeling of being invisible in the middle of the world. He was 38 years old. He had not always been alone. There was a time, not so long ago, when Thursday evenings meant his wife Dana making pasta at home while Lily sat in her high chair and banged a wooden spoon against the tray. There was music. There was noise. There was a life that felt full in every corner. Then, in the winter of 2020, everything changed. Dana was driving home from the grocery store on an icy road when another car slid through a red light. She did not come home that evening. She never came home again. Lily had just turned 2. She barely remembered her mother now, which was both a mercy and a grief that Marcus carried quietly, every day, like a stone in his pocket. He had spent the years since then learning to be both parents at once, learning how to braid hair from a video on his phone, learning how to answer questions he never expected to answer alone, learning how to hold it all together so that his daughter would never feel the weight of what they had lost. He was good at it. Everyone told him so. His mother, his neighbors, the teachers at Lily's school, they all said he was doing a wonderful job. And maybe he was. But there was a part of him, a quiet and honest part, that knew he was also very tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that builds slowly over years, in the space where a partner used to be. He picked up his fork and started eating. The pasta was good, simple and warm, exactly what the evening called for. He took a sip of wine. He let himself relax, just a little, into the booth. He told himself this was fine. This was a perfectly good Thursday night. He was almost finished with his meal when he felt a small presence beside the table. He looked up. A little girl was standing at the edge of his booth, looking at him with the steady, serious expression that only young children can produce, the expression of someone who has made a decision and is very committed to following through with it. She had curly red hair that went in all directions, a bright green sweater that was a size too big, and small brown boots on her feet. She could not have been older than 6 or 7. She glanced back over her shoulder, then looked at Marcus again, and leaned in close. In a low, careful voice, the kind children use when they are absolutely certain about something, she whispered. "My mom has been looking for you for years." Marcus blinked. He set down his fork. He looked across the restaurant and saw a woman near the hostess stand, watching them. She was in her mid-30s, with dark wavy hair pulled loosely to one side. She had one hand pressed over her mouth, and her eyes were wide, not with panic, but with something more complicated. Something between surprise and recognition and a feeling she clearly had not expected to feel on a Thursday night in a small Italian restaurant. Marcus looked back at the little girl. "I think you might have the wrong person, sweetheart," he said gently. "I don't think I know your mom." The little girl shook her head. She did not shake it the way children do when they are guessing. She shook it the way someone does when they are completely sure. No, she said. Your name is Marcus. And you have a daughter named Lily. And you went to Westfield High School a long time ago. She paused and added, very seriously, Mom showed me your picture. Marcus stared at her. He did not know what to say. His mind moved slowly, like it was trying to find the right file in a very full drawer. Before he could speak, the woman crossed the restaurant. She walked quickly but not in a panic, more like someone who had made up her mind and was simply carrying it out. She stopped at the side of his booth and looked at him, and up close he could see that she had dark eyes and a dusting of freckles across her nose, and that she was working very hard to hold herself together. I am so sorry, she said. I don't even know how to explain this. Is it okay if I sit down for just a moment? Marcus nodded. She slid into the booth across from him, and her daughter climbed up beside her and sat neatly with her hands in her lap, looking very satisfied with herself. The woman took a breath. My name is Claire, she said. Claire Navarro. And I know this is the strangest thing that will ever happen to you in a restaurant. She was not wrong. She told him her story slowly, in the way people tell stories they have carried for a long time, carefully, choosing each word. She had grown up in the foster care system in Ohio. She had moved between several homes as a child, and by the time she was 16, she had learned not to count on anything staying the same for very long. She had learned to keep her feelings in a place where they could not be easily reached. In her sophomore year of high school, her English teacher had signed the class up for a pen pal program. Students from different schools would write letters to one another, real letters, on paper, once a month. Claire had not wanted to do it. She did not see the point of writing to a stranger. But it was required, so she wrote her first letter and mailed it and forgot about it almost immediately. 2 weeks later, she received a letter back. It was from a boy named Marcus, from Westfield High School. His handwriting was messy and a little hard to read, and his first letter was awkward in the way that most first letters from 16-year-olds are awkward. He wrote about his favorite music and a movie he had just seen and a dog his family had recently adopted named Captain. He did not ask too many questions about her life, which she actually appreciated. She was not ready to answer questions yet. But he kept writing. Every month, without fail, a letter arrived. And slowly, without either of them planning it, the letters became real. He told her about his parents arguing that year and how it made the house feel small. She told him, for the first time ever, that she was in foster care. He did not treat it as something dramatic or unusual. He simply wrote back and said that it sounded hard and that he was glad she had told him. On her birthday in March, she received a card in the mail. It had a cartoon dog on the front, she did not know why, and inside it said, simply, Happy Birthday. Hope it was a good one. Marcus. She had stared at that card for a long time. No one outside of her caseworker had acknowledged her birthday that year. A boy she had never met, whose face she had never seen, had remembered. She kept every letter he sent. All 11 of them. At the end of that school year, the pen pal program ended. There was no final letter, no goodbye, just silence where the letters used to be. She had tried to find him once, a few years later, but nothing came of it. Life moved forward. She finished school, built herself a life with her own 2 hands, had her daughter Rosie, and eventually moved to Columbus for a new job 3 years ago. She had thought about those letters, sometimes, over the years. Not in a romantic way, she wanted to be clear about that. They had been teenagers, strangers through paper. But she had thought about them the way you think about a song that helped you through a hard winter. You do not need to hear it every day. But you are glad it existed. Last week, Rosie had been going through a box of her mother's things, the way curious children do, and found the old letters tied together with a piece of kitchen string. Claire had read a few of them aloud to her daughter, the way you might share a small piece of your past. And at the bottom of the box, there was one more thing, a clipping from a school newsletter that an old friend had mailed to her years ago as a small joke between them. It had a tiny photo of a boy on the student council, with the name Marcus Webb printed underneath. Rosie, who had the extraordinary memory of a child who pays close attention to everything, had looked up from her dinner that evening, stared at a man sitting alone in a corner booth across the restaurant, and said quietly, Mom. That's him. Claire had looked. She had told herself it could not possibly be the same person. Columbus was not a small town. The odds were not reasonable. But Rosie was already sliding out of the booth, and there was no stopping her. Marcus listened to all of this without saying a word. He sat very still. The restaurant had grown quieter around them, the dinner crowd had thinned, and only a few tables were still occupied. The candle between them flickered once in a small draught. When Claire finished, she pressed her lips together and said, "You probably don't remember any of it." "The letters. I know it was a long time ago." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the tablecloth. Then he looked at her. "I don't," he admitted. "I remember the pen pal program. I remember writing letters. But I couldn't have told you who I wrote to." He paused. "I had no idea any of it mattered to anyone. That's the part that always stayed with me," Claire said quietly. "You did something that helped me through one of the hardest years of my life, and you didn't even know you were doing it. You were just being kind. That was it. Just ordinary kindness, from someone who had no reason to bother." Marcus did not know what to say to that. He was not a man who showed his emotions easily, but something in his chest shifted, the way a door shifts when a window opens in another room. He told her about Dana. He had not planned to, but the story came out naturally, the way stories do when you are sitting across from someone who has already been honest with you. He told her about the accident, about the years after, about learning to do everything alone. About Lily, who was 6 now and fearless and funny and the best thing in his life by a very wide distance. About the specific loneliness of loving someone deeply while missing, every day, the person you had expected to love them with you. Claire listened. She did not say she was sorry in the hollow way that people sometimes do when they do not know what else to offer. She just listened, and when he was done, she said quietly that it sounded like he had done something very hard and done it well. They talked for 2 hours. Rosie fell asleep somewhere in the second hour, her head resting on her mother's arm, her small feet tucked up beside her on the booth seat. The waiter brought 2 glasses of water and then disappeared without pressing them for anything. The last few other tables finished their meals and filtered out until it was just the 2 of them and the sleeping child and the low sound of music coming from somewhere near the kitchen. When they finally stood to go, they exchanged numbers in the simple, practical way of 2 people who are not certain what comes next but know that something does. Marcus helped Claire ease Rosie's coat on, the little girl was half asleep and not very cooperative, and walked them to the front door. Outside, the October air was cool and clear. A few stars were visible above the glow of the streetlights. "Tell her she did good," Marcus said, nodding at Rosie, who was now draped over her mother's shoulder with her eyes closed. Claire smiled, a full, real smile, the kind that reaches all the way up. "She already knows. She is very pleased with herself." He laughed. It was a real laugh, one that came without warning and surprised him a little. He drove home with the radio off and the windows cracked, the cool air moving through the car. He did not try to make sense of what had happened that evening. He did not put a name to it or decide what it meant. But when he pulled into his driveway and sat in the dark for a moment before going inside, he noticed that the house did not feel quite as quiet as it had when he left. Something had shifted, gently, the way things sometimes do without any announcement, like a light coming on in a room you had quietly stopped expecting to use. He texted Claire at 11:47 that night. "I'm glad Rosie spotted me. Tell her she did good." She replied a few minutes later, "She already knows. She's very smug about it." He smiled at his phone in the dark of his bedroom. The following Saturday, the 4 of them met for coffee at a small place near the park. Lily and Rosie spent the first 10 minutes watching each other with cautious eyes, the way children do when they are deciding whether to trust a new person. Then Rosie said something about a cartoon she liked. Lily disagreed with great confidence. And within 15 minutes they were sitting side by side, sharing a cinnamon roll, arguing with the natural ease of people who have known each other for much longer than they have. Marcus and Claire sat across from each other and drank their coffee and watched their daughters and talked about ordinary things, work, the neighborhood, good places to take children on rainy days, the kind of small and comfortable conversation that builds between people slowly, without force. They kept meeting. Carefully, at their own pace, the way 2 people move when they understand the value of something and do not want to rush it. Weekend afternoons at the park. Dinners where the children ate noisily at one end of the table and the adults talked quietly at the other. Phone calls in the evenings after bedtime, when the houses were finally still. Two people learning each other honestly, in real time, without pretending to be further along than they were. By the following autumn, they were something warm and steady that neither of them had a perfect word for. And neither of them needed one. What Marcus knew, sitting at his kitchen table one morning while Lily ate her cereal and the early sun came through the window and fell across the floor, was that a lonely Thursday evening and an old box of paper letters and one very small, very determined little girl had given him something he had quietly stopped expecting to find. He had left his house that night simply to avoid the silence. He had come home carrying the beginning of something that would make every room feel less silent for a very long time.